Yes, Mataji, I'm giving you now. I was in another window, that's why I was not able to unmute. Yeah, now you can share the screen.
Vinita, can you see my screen?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Mataji, we can start the class.
Prabhu anta maamulu cheptanu.
Sorry, Mataji, got used to Prabhu. So, Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome. So, today we are doing Srimad Bhagavatam summary study, Canto 3, Chapter 2. And we have Her Grace Sukha Sagari Mataji to enlighten on this topic. I would like now hand over the call to her. Thank you, Mataji, for your valuable time and session. Please take over the call.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you, Vinita, for allowing me to speak today. And yeah, thanks to all the organizers for giving me an opportunity to purify myself. Perhaps this is the only way I study Bhagavatam in detail. So otherwise, I'm like literally skimming through and doing a fast reading. So thank you so much. And I pray at the lotus feet of all Vaishnavas that, please bless me so I can speak something in relevance to this topic for today. And with that, I'd like to, we can start today's session. And this chapter, we are continuing with Canto 3. And last week we saw chapter 1, questions by Vidura. Today we're going to be seeing a summary study of chapter 2. And this chapter is titled Remembrance of Lord Krishna. Anybody wants to take a guess who is actually remembering Lord Krishna? So Vidura is meeting whom in the end of the last chapter? The last chapter ended with a note where, okay, let's just go and do
Maitreya.
Yeah, Vidura, eventually he's going to take, lessons or from Maitreya, but first he meets with Uddhava, right? We ended the last chapter, chapter 1, on that note, right? They both were actually going on the banks of Yamuna river, and that's where they met. So yeah, we'll be starting with that in that same context. So what happens when Vidura actually meets Uddhava? So, and we'll see the remembrance of Lord Krishna is actually done by whom. We will soon be able to look into all those things, how Lord Krishna is remembered in how many ways and how sweetly. So before we start, let's do the invocation prayers. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishnapreshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Just give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay. So let's do a brief recap of what we went over last week in chapter 1, questions by Vidura. So, a brief introduction was given, like the Canto 2, it ended on the sages asking about, what was the conversation that happened between Vidura and Maitreya? How did they meet? How did all this happen? So that was the question the Canto 2 ended on. And then Canto 3 actually started with, why did Vidura, go on a pilgrimage? What were the events that actually led to Vidura's renunciation? So we saw that, Dhritarashtra was not only physically blind, but he was also spiritually blind, and he was blinded by the affection, for his son, and Duryodhana, who actually was a very evil at heart. He did not want to even, he disrespected the Pandavas, and he even disrespected Lord Krishna's instructions. So Vidura actually came to advise Dhritarashtra, but then Duryodhana actually called him Dasi Putra, right? Like a son of a maid servant. What is your, what right do you have to actually speak to us? You're nobody. He kind of like treated him very badly. So Vidura actually took that opportunity to leave the palace, and he wanted to go on a pilgrimage. But then we saw in chapter 1 that Lord Krishna was actually there, right? We see in the beginning of the chapter, he says that Lord Krishna actually visited the palace, right? The homes of the Pandavas, as though it was his own home, his own home, right? So when Lord Krishna was there, why should Vidura go on a pilgrimage? So this was explained in the last chapter, that why he went on a pilgrimage. Actually, even though Lord Krishna was present there, so because we go to different places of pilgrimage so that we can take, darshan, hear more about Lord Krishna, take divine darshan, associate with devotees like that. But what was the reason for Vidura to leave and go on a pilgrimage when Lord Krishna himself was present? Does anybody recall the reason from the last class? Okay, so so what is mentioned there is that Vidura actually wanted to meet with Maitreya and get this transcendental knowledge. And also it's, in the previous chapter we saw in one of the verses, it said that Vidura had actually, he had very good fortune at birth. He had enough punya that he, took birth in like a royal family, and he enjoyed all those royal comforts, right, in the kingdom, in the palace, like that. So, but then because of his association with Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, all his pious credits had expired, and so he actually was going negative on balance, and so he had to up his pious credits to actually associate with Lord Krishna in that mood of a devotee. So this is another reason which is also given in chapter 1 as to why Vidura actually went on a pilgrimage, because he ran out of his pious credits and he thought he's really not eligible, to go and take association of Lord Krishna. And he said he had to purify himself of all that bad association. So there, like these two reasons are listed in the previous chapter as to why Vidura left home and how he got association of Maitreya. So also it was mentioned in the last few verses that Vidura met Uddhava on the banks of river Yamuna, because, in near Vrindavan, because it said that devotees, all devotees, they go like how honey, I mean, bees are attracted to honey. So similar way, devotees are attracted to places of where the Lord, Supreme Lord, did, performed his pastimes. And what is the supermost, place is none other than Vrindavan. So it was but natural that Vidura met Uddhava there, because both are actually trying to connect with the Lord, and they are uh, pure devotees, and so it was but natural that this meeting happened at the banks of River Yamuna. So with that note, we will try to delve into what today's chapter entails. Today's chapter is, like I said, it's Remembrance of Lord Krishna. That's the title. And on the right, you can see the picture, I captured from Subodhini Guide, which gives a high-level overview of what this chapter entails. So the verses 1 to 6, they actually speak of Uddhava, how he was such a pure devotee, and how he exhibited a lot of ecstatic symptoms when trying to remember Lord Krishna. And then verses 7 to 11, Uddhava, in one sense, he laments the unfortunate situation of the Yadus and the Brajvasis, and he says that they didn't take enough advantage of, the presence of Lord Krishna, and they could have served him better. So that mood is exhibited in verses 7 to 11. And then in verses 12 to 14, Uddhava actually remembers the beauty of the Lord. So the Lord's beauty is described, how, his various limbs, his face, everything is described. And 15 to 24 describes the Lord Krishna's mercy or his bewildering activities, how he, actually paritranaya sadhunam, vinashaya cha dushkritam, all those kind of things, different leelas the Lord Krishna performed is mentioned in verses 15 to 24. And 25 to 34 discuss the more intimate Vraja pastimes. So now, can anybody understand who was remembering? Why is this chapter called Remembrance of Lord Krishna, and who was remembering Lord Krishna? Anybody?
Uddhava.
Yeah, Uddhava was remembering Lord Krishna. Thank you so much. Yeah, so Uddhava. So Vidura, actually, he goes and meets Uddhava, like we saw in the last chapter. He embraces Uddhava. And then he asks Uddhava, how he actually heard at Prabhasa Kshetra about the end of the war and how he lost many of his relatives, and how the Lord was also leaving the planet and all those things. But still, he wanted to hear from Uddhava. And so he asked Uddhava, how are, everybody doing, like that. So this chapter starts off with that. So as soon as Vidura asks this question in the verse 1 from Uddhava, so Uddhava, immediately the remembrance of Lord Krishna comes to him, and he exhibits like transcendental symptoms, like symptoms of ecstasy, because he is immediately transferred to the transcendental realm. So I'd like to read a few excerpts from the purport there. All the purports here are golden, as always. Prabhupada's purports are very, very amazing, to read. So let me just read a few excerpts, not the whole purport. Uddhava was one who, even in his childhood, at the age of 5 years, was so absorbed in the service of Lord Krishna that when he was called by his mother for morning breakfast, he did not wish to have it. So Uddhava was, such a great devotee even from birth. And even it says at the age of 5 years, he was so absorbed, right? Like we also have seen how Prahlad Maharaj in Canto 7, it says, Kaumaram Acharit Pragya. So, the persons who have been blessed with this human form of life, they should actually take advantage of this human form of life and start their devotional life, very early in their life. Even at the Kaumara Acharit Pragya, like it says, even at the age of 5 years. So Uddhava is a Nitya Siddha. So he was, always a devotee. And even at the age of 5, he would forego his food. Like, even when his mother called for morning breakfast, he did not want to have it. He played with dolls of Krishna. And so he was always lost in that transcendental realm of playing with Krishna, enjoying, his time with Krishna. So this way, he would serve the dolls by dressing, feeding, and worshipping them. And thus, he was constantly absorbed in the play of transcendental realization. These are the signs of an eternally liberated soul. A soul who is already advanced in devotional service has the opportunity to take birth in an enlightened family. Shuchinam Srimatam Gehe Yoga Bhashto Abhijayate. Even the fallen devotee gets the opportunity to take his birth in the family of a well-situated Brahmana or in a rich, well-to-do mercantile family. So it is said that Lord Krishna, anybody who gets this valuable form of human life must start their devotional life very early, in their life, and not wait until we get like old, like 60, and we retire, and then, okay, now I don't have anything to do. Let me take up, some devotional service and try to do something. So that should not be the mood. Like Prabhupada is saying here in the purport, we should start our devotion life very early. I was hearing, a class by one senior advanced devotee, and he was saying the same. He was mentioning that we don't wait, right? I mean, we eat food every day. We try to have fun every day. We sleep every day. We don't say, okay, I will do that after 60. We're not saying like that. So why devotional service is also, it should be a part of our life. And, it should be some second nature to us like that. So we shouldn't be thinking that let me do that around 60 years of age or something like that. But so we should start early, and it's also a good idea, practical advice Prabhupada is giving here in the last paragraph of the purport to verse 2 is that, children must be given these Krishna dolls, like that Radharani Krishna dolls to play, so that, they are one way or the other involved in devotional service at a very young age. But very sadly and unfortunately, we see that kids these days are handed, different kinds of toys, like it, especially, like for boys, like guns, cars, I don't know, some kind of video games too at a very young age like that. It's very unfortunate that is doing, but perhaps we should take lesson from Prabhupada's purport here and, do better for our own children, right? So this is, a brief introduction of as to how Uddhava is such a natural devotee, and also, so renounced at a very young age. He was totally absorbed in the thoughts of Lord Krishna. So then this thing segues into like the next point, which I've written. Generally, in old age, a person is allowed retirement from mundane service. But in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no retirement at all. So in verse 3, we see that actually Uddhava is now old, okay? And he is actually tired because, he is old like that, he's tired. But still, as soon as he heard this message, as soon as he heard Vidura question about, Lord Krishna, immediately he went into the transcendental ecstasy, into the transcendental realm, and he wanted to he was totally lost on that platform, and he was thinking of all the Lord's activities, Leela and everything like that. So Prabhupada explains in the purport that for a devotee, who is absorbed in devotional service, they do not experience, the signs of fatigue or tiredness or anything like that. So they say, so he writes in the purport, it's a very insightful purport. The service attitude of the devotee gradually increases and never becomes slackened. Transcendental service to the Lord is not mundane. Generally, in old age, a person is allowed retirement from mundane service. But in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no retirement at all. On the contrary, the service attitude increases more and more with the progress of age. In this transcendental service, there is no saturation, and therefore there is no retirement. So Prabhupada tries to explain here that, the last paragraph, Prabhupada says, Uddhava undoubtedly became old, but that does not mean that his spirit became old. His service attitude matured on the transcendental plane, and therefore, as soon as he was questioned by Vidura about Lord Krishna, he at once remembered his Lord. So this is the sign of pure devotional service to the Lord. That's what Prabhupada says in the last line of this purport. So this is some kind of a gauge. Perhaps we can also measure ourselves with, like, where, with age, we should try and see, at least try to see some kind of transcendental maturity in our devotional practices. But if we don't see that, then perhaps we have to rise up to a better level and try to do more services, so we can, like how Prabhupada is explaining in this verse, that if for a pure devotee, for a devotee, even old age will not be a restriction, or it won't be a constraint for an old, for a devotee, because they're so absorbed, like how Uddhava is being described here, that even though he grew older, but still he immediately was lost on the transcendental realm of Krishna's remembrance. So next verse, it says that for a moment he remained dead silent and his body did not move. So he was actually absorbed in the transcendental ecstasy. But then later on, he actually comes back. He had to literally force himself to come back to this material realm. So, and Vidura, when he saw this, like these different ecstatic, emotions, or the different ecstasy symptoms on Uddhava, he understood that Uddhava was actually on a different plane. He was not on this material realm. So the purport to verse 5 actually describes, how devotional service progresses through 3 different stages. So let me read a few excerpts from there. There are 3 different stages of development in devotional service. The first stage is that of following the regulative principles prescribed in the codes of devotional service. So this is Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. The second stage is that of assimilation and realization of the steady condition of devotional service. The last stage is that of ecstasy, symptomized by transcendental body expression. So the 9 different modes of different devotional service, Shravanam, Kirtanam, etc., are the beginning of the process. So Prabhupada says that, the devotee, you generally, like as we, start at the sadhana siddha level, like we do the Vaidhi sadhana bhakti and then progress slowly to, the different stages like bhava bhakti and then prema, like that. And Prabhupada says that gradually rising in exceptional cases to the Mahabhava stage, which is generally not possible for the living entities. So that is like a Mahabhava is like the highest stage, and it may not, it's not generally possible for living entities. But these were manifested by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the personification of love of God. So for, sadhana siddha devotee like that, it may not generally be possible for us to reach the Mahabhava stage, when on this planet Earth. But these symptoms were manifested by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's what Srila Prabhupada is trying to explain. And more details of these different stages and everything, I'm not going into too much detail there, is actually discussed in the Nectar of Devotion. We can study separately on that. So after Vidura, saw this, and Uddhava actually came back to this material realm. And there's also some discussion of the Bhakti Lata Bija, like, the creeper of devotional service, towards the last paragraph of, purports number 6. And let me just read a few excerpts from there. The creeper of devotional service, so nourished, gradually grows, and the devotee, acting as a gardener, goes on pouring the water of constant hearing and chanting. The creeper of devotional service gradually grows so high that it passes through the entire material universe and enters into the spiritual sky, growing still higher and higher until it reaches the planet of Goloka Vrindavana. As a creeper takes shelter of another stronger tree, similarly, the creeper of devotional service, nourished by the devotee, takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord and thus becomes fixed. When the creeper is fixed, then the fruit of the creeper comes into existence. So this is basically describing the different stages, like starting with Adar, Shraddha, Vajana Kriya, Sadhu Sangha, all those things. It's going and, describing the stage of fixed, like Nishtha. When the creeper is fixed, then the fruit of the creeper comes into existence, and the gardener who nourished it is able to enjoy this fruit of love, and his life becomes successful. That Uddhava attained this stage is evident from his dealings. He could simultaneously reach the supreme planet and still appear in this world. Like we have also read elsewhere that, Jivan Mukta, like even though we may be belonging to this, but we can still function on a Jivan Mukta platform, right? So our acharyas like Srila Prabhupada, we have heard many, anecdotes and stories like where Srila Prabhupada would enter into a trance, sometimes while giving the Bhagavatam class, and he would be on a different plane. And Srila Prabhupada would actually be able to see Narada Muni sitting in the classes like that. So Srila Prabhupada was actually, even though, he appeared to be on the material realm, but he was functioning at that transcendental realm. So we see that Uddhava also, he's a pure devotee of the Lord. And we see that how immediately, just one mention of Krishna by Vidura, he got transported to the spiritual realm, and suddenly he had to really come back to this material realm like that. So this is like the first, few verses which describes like how Uddhava was remembering the Lord and how he's a pure devotee of the Lord and how he exhibited all these transcendental symptoms. So the next theme of verses is how Uddhava laments about the unfortunate position of the Yadus, and also there's a comparison between devotees and non-devotees like that, and how Krishna is actually compared to the sun. So we'll see a few more details on these things. So let me go back to the purports. Like I'm just trying to give you, except the purports are all, like I said, very, very nectarian. And that's why I thought we should, perhaps read a few excerpts directly from the words of Srila Prabhupada himself. And yeah. So Uddhava said, Sri Uddhava said, "My dear Vidura, the sun of the world, Lord Krishna has set, and our house has now been swallowed by the great snake of time. What can I say to you about our welfare?" So Uddhava actually knew that, Vidura is very pained and he is very hurt that, Krishna is actually wound up his pastimes on earth, and, and all the Yadus have left like that. So he was feeling, he could understand the pain of, Vidura like that, and he could identify with it. And so he wanted to sympathize with Vidura, and by saying that, he compared Krishna to the sun and said that after the sun has set, it becomes dark, and it's not, the world is merged in the darkness of grief. That's how Vidura, Uddhava, Prabhupada explains it. Neither Vidura nor Uddhava nor anyone else could be happy. So Prabhupada describes in the purport that the comparison of Krishna to the sun is very appropriate. As soon as the sun sets, darkness automatically appears. But the darkness experienced by the common man does not affect the sun itself. So like the sun, when, it sets here, it's actually rising in the other part of the globe, right? So the other hemisphere is actually having sunrise. So similarly, Krishna, when he winds up his pastime, on this material realm, there's Nitya Leela happening. So his pastimes are eternally happening in some other planet like that, right? So that's what is being explained by Prabhupada here. That so a devotee actually he or she understands that, Krishna, though it appears as though Krishna has actually left this planet, the devotee is in constant remembrance of the Lord. So the constant remembrance of the Lord is actually equal to, or on the absolute plane, it's equal to being with Lord Krishna himself. Like how we saw the gopis when they were in separation from Krishna, they were in constantly, like they were like in one sense maddened by the love of Krishna, and they were always in the thoughts of Krishna. So that way they were always with Krishna. It was not like, even though they, there was some kind of an apparent separation, but Krishna was always with them. So Prabhupada explains that even though, Krishna may wind up his pastimes, the devotees have a lot of these pastimes, to discuss about the Lord, like how today we are studying the Bhagavatam. So these pastimes keep our memories fresh, and that's how we associate with the Lord. So a real devotee does not like lament like that. But then he says that pure devotees are given this feeling of worthlessness, like, they feel that they are so worthless, like, they miss the Lord so much. And, like even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he used to, cry in separation of Lord Krishna and say that, how come I'm even breathing like that, right? I mean, and how can I be still breathing? Why am I still alive? So devotees, pure devotees of the Lord, they actually experience these kind of pains, and this kind of sadness. And Prabhupada explains that this is actually the sign of a pure devotee. So so even Srimati Radharani, like, she also experiences this kind of pain, of separation from Lord Krishna. So as Prabhupada explains that as we go or advance in our devotional service, these kind of symptoms appear, like where we, experience this kind of separation from the Lord. And then this is actually the mercy of the Lord in one sense. So it is to actually, enhance the love between the Lord and the devotees. So it's a special mercy of the Lord that this devotees experience this kind of separation and pain. And towards the end of the purport, a very nice, Prabhupada is mentioning a very nice sentence there. As at sunset, the snakes become powerful, thieves are encouraged, ghosts become active, the lotus becomes disfigured, and the Chakravaki laments. So with the disappearance of Lord Krishna, the atheists feel enlivened and the devotees become sorry. So we know, right? Sunset, after sunset, all the vices, people engage in all kinds of vices, and like it says, the snakes become powerful, then the thieves, they engage in the thieving activities, ghosts, and the lotus also, it blooms with the sunrise, and also it actually closes, with the sunset, like that. So this is not, I mean, the sunset is really not a great time for a devotee, because the devotees, they feel sad, they want to do a more devotional service, like that. So and Krishna is being compared to the sun here. So in that sense, when Krishna actually winds up his pastime, there is this feeling of separation, though actually the devotee, can remember the pastimes of the Lord. And in that, like how we saw Uddhava, in that mood, they can be on a transcendental plane, always in the association of Krishna, but still there is this pain experienced by devotees, which is actually the mercy of the Lord, like that. So moving on, to the, oops, oh my God, I'm going very slow. Perhaps I may just skip a few purports. Yeah, but the purports are very beautiful. So I just will skim through the purports, maybe not explain too much in detail. And so Uddhava, on this note, like we see their separation and experience by Vidura and Uddhava. And Uddhava further goes on in the next verse. He says, Durbhago bata lokoyam. He says the universe with all its planets is most unfortunate, and even more unfortunate are the members of the Yadu dynasty, because they could not identify Lord Hari as the personality of Godhead any more than the fish could identify the moon. So it's explained in the purport, I'm not going through the details, that the Yadus actually had the concept of Krishna as the Paramatma. So they had at that level of Paramatma, but the but then in the purport, it's also described that the Vrajavasis, they were even worse than the Yadus, because they just thought he's, their friend like that. They didn't have any concept of Paramatma or Bhagavan or anything like that. So they just were at a, like having a family relation with Lord Krishna. So actually, Uddhava is very, he feels that it's very unfortunate that, you know, even though he knew that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he could not offer the service how he would really like to serve Lord Krishna. And so he was in this kind of a regretful mood. And like I explained earlier, this viraha is a special mercy, given by the Lord to his devotees, so that, it enhances their love for the Lord. So it has to be taken in that respect. And there's also a mention, any more than fish could identify the moon. So we know that when there was the churning of the milk ocean, the moon appeared, right? But then the fish in the milk ocean, they think that this moon is also, a shiny fish just like them. They don't think that, oh, it's different from them. The moon is different naturally from the fish. So similarly here, the Yadus also, though the Lord was, there, they were all family, and they had all their, pastimes with the Lord. Like daily they used to sit and do everything with the Lord, but still they never recognized the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They only had that realization of the Lord as Paramatma. That's it. That's what Prabhupada mentions. And so in that same way, like just as how the fish, they think that the moon is one among them, it's just another fish. So similarly, when great personalities walk this planet Earth, we also tend to sometimes miss the greatness of these personalities, right? Like I was listening to a class recently when Prabhupada, he became so famous, in the West. Like he opened so many temples, and he also preached the science of Krishna consciousness. But when he went back to India, so the Malik family to which he belonged, they just treated him as yet another person who just became famous. They did not understand like the position of Srila Prabhupada, like how devotees understand, like he's an acharya who is at such a high level like that. So the family people, I mean, they tend to not realize the the exalted nature, right? Even we see that we take things for granted when it's our own family. So like that, in the same way, the analogy is given of the fish who think that the moon is just one among them, like that. So that's described in verse 8. And then let's move on. I will try to. Okay, let me skip through this. I think I discussed that. Okay, the verse 9, there is verse 10, there is an important purport. Like there is something which we can actually learn. Under no circumstances can the words of persons bewildered by the illusory energy of the Lord deviate the intelligence of those who are completely surrendered souls. So this purport is very important. Let me just kind of read a few sentences. The Yadavas were only partially cognizant of the Lord, but they are also glorious because they had the opportunity to associate with the Lord, who acted as the head of the family. The Yadavas and other devotees of the Lord are different from those who wrongly calculated him to be an ordinary human personality. Such persons are certainly bewildered by the illusory energy. They are hellish and are envious of the Supreme Lord. So let me skip a few lines. They are always very eager to establish that Lord Krishna was an ordinary man and was killed by a hunter due to his impious acts in plotting to kill the sons of Dhritarashtra and Jarasandha. So many people say, right, yeah, Gandhari cursed, and that's why Krishna, left the planet. Like there's so many things, people cook up stories like that. But Prabhupada goes on to say in this purport, it's very important that devotees, they don't pay heed to these kind of stories. I mean, because they are totally, surrendered to the Lord, and they understand the supreme position of the Lord, and they know that the Lord is never affected by any of these kind of, Gandhari's curse or any kind of karmic reaction, right? Namam karmani limpanti. That's what is the verse from Bhagavad Gita. So the Lord is unaffected by the reactions of work. According to the atheistic point of view, Lord Krishna's family, the Yadu dynasty, was vanquished due to being cursed by the Brahmanas for the sins committed by Krishna in killing the sons of Dhritarashtra, etc. All these blasphemies do not touch the heart of the devotees, and they know perfectly well what is what. Their intelligence regarding the Lord is never disturbed. So this is what Uddhava is trying to say, that many people, they come up with the stories. There's actually more background, right? Like, we know Durvasa Muni, he actually kicked, Vishnu on the chest, right? Like that. And it was Durvasa, right? Yeah. And then, who was he? Okay. So, and then to actually give him a chance to rectify the sin, he actually took, this birth of Jara in this pastime, where he is the, he is the one who, he's the hunter who actually puts the arrow to Lord Krishna's foot. And Lord Krishna knows that it's him, and he says, it's okay, sorry, it was Bhrigu Muni, right? It was not Durvasa, I think. So, yeah, somebody has something. Yeah, Bhrigu Muni, yeah, sorry, yeah. Sorry, I was saying the wrong one. Yeah, so then this was actually a chance for him to, atone for what he did then. So, so he took this form of Jara, and this pastime happened where he actually pierces Lord Krishna with the arrow, and then this pastime of the Lord leaving the all this is actually orchestrated by Krishna to give him a chance to purify himself. So this is explained elsewhere. I'm not going into too many details. There's a lot to be said about all these wonderful verses. So let's move on more. Okay, verse 11. Yeah. Let me try to. Yeah. In verse 11, I want to just bring the attention to this specific words. Like Prabhupada says in the purport, in this verse, the word avitripta drisham is most significant. The conditioned souls in the material world are all trying to satisfy the senses in various ways, but they fail to do so because it's impossible to be satisfied by such efforts. So in this verse, Prabhupada explains in the purport as to why a person must take to Krishna consciousness. In the first line, the avitripta drisham. Avitripta drisham is the living entity is always unsatisfied. He is not happy with what he or she is doing as long as his actions and his tendencies are materially motivated. So when, like you say, right, when we, the comparison of our brain is given to that of like a blotting paper, like how when you put a drop of ink on the blotting paper, it just spreads like that, right? So similarly, what thoughts we put into our mind, it just spreads through our consciousness, and that's how it is done. And when we put all these materialistic thoughts into our head, it only gives rise to all this, lust, anger, greed, all those 6 types of, vices. So and until we put our minds and efforts on Krishna, Lord Krishna, and we do not have peace. So we'll always be hankering. There'll be always this shochati and kankshati happening, because until, our minds are fixed on Krishna and our life is fixed around devotional service, this kind, like Prabhupada says, the conditional souls in the material world are always trying to satisfy, but it is impossible, So why? Because we have to fill up our desires with that of Lord Krishna. But on the contrary, we try to fill up our desires with some material things, and that's never going to give us happiness, right? because they are all temporary in nature and they only give more distress. So in that way, Prabhupada explains that, however, we try to push ourselves and say, okay, let me try to become rich or famous or the most educated, let me try to complete a PhD or things like that. It's never, never, ever going to give us happiness, because we're missing the point here. We just need to fill ourselves with Krishna. Just like there's a lot of beautiful analogies given there, just like the fish, when it's taken out of water, and you can give it even rasgulla or paneer sabzi, it's going to die because it belongs to water. Like that, our lives are, our constitutional position is to offer devotional service to the Lord. So as long as we're engaged in material activities, it's never going to give us any kind of peace or bliss like that. So I'm skipping a few more points there, but this is like the gist of what that avitripta drisham, fish out of water analogy, means there. Let's move on. And yeah, time is just passing so fast. Yeah. So these verses 12 to 14, they actually discuss the beauty, like we see, in these few verses in this chapter so far, we've seen how how Uddhava, he goes into a trance, how Uddhava is, a highly devotional nature is described, how he's a Nityasiddha, and how he experiences this transcendental ecstasy, all this symptoms of transcendental ecstasy. And also there's a reference given to how a devotee also does, enjoys the pastimes of the Lord in separation. Even though the Lord leaves the planet, the devotee is actually on a transcendental realm just by remembering the pastimes of the Lord, like that. And then there's also reference given to how the atheists, they, it's time for them to enjoy, because they feel, okay, they even question, right, if Lord Krishna really appeared, why did he have to leave, like that, right? They even question that he could have been here, so people know that, he's here and this is the Lord, he's still in Vrindavan, and why did he have to leave? But the devotees of the Lord, they know that, even if the Lord is, having his pastimes elsewhere, just by remembering the Lord and being in the remembrance of the pastimes actually takes them to the association of the Lord. So that's how a devotee actually functions. So we went through all these things, and now, Tan Nama Rupa Charitadi. So now we'll see the Rupa of the Lord, the beauty of the Lord, being described in the next few verses. Let me just read a few things. When Lord Krishna was within this universe, he seemed to be a human being because he appeared in a manner just suitable for his pastimes in the mortal world. He did not appear in human society in his Vaikuntha feature with 4 hands, because that would not have been suitable for his pastimes. But in spite of appearing as a human being, no one was or is equal to him in any respect in any of the 6 different opulences. And then, the prakata and aprakata leelas of the Lord are described in the next few lines of the purport. And like the beauty of the Lord, how he has all the 6 opulences in full. And the last few lines speak of the excellence of his Rasa Leela at Vrindavan, and his householder life with 16,000 wives is wonderful even for Narayana in Vaikuntha, and is certainly so for other living entities within this mortal world. So even Brahma, right, he was very, very, he was like, who is this boy, who is doing all these pastimes, and who is he? I mean, he also couldn't understand, right, the exalted position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So even the demigods, Muhyanti Yatsuraya, like, the first verse says, they are also bewildered by the beauty, the pastimes, the qualities of the Lord. So that is described. And this is a nice one. The demigods from the upper, lower, and middle universal planetary systems assembled at the altar of Rajasuya sacrifice performed by Maharaja Yudhishthira. After seeing the beautiful bodily features of Lord Krishna, they all contemplated that he was the ultimate dexterous creation of Brahma, the creator of human being. So, when all these demigods, they all assembled and saw the beauty of Krishna, they thought, wow, this must be like, the par excellence work of Brahma. They didn't realize that the Krishna actually, Brahma came from Lord Krishna. They didn't realize that, but they were thinking that this must be like a wonderful creation of Lord Brahma, like that. So Krishna actually disguises himself like that, right? And for the sake of pastimes. And so the beauty of Krishna like that is described in these few verses. And yeah, let me just move on. Yeah, how the gopis also, they enjoyed with Krishna, all that is described in verses 12 to 14. Let's move on to the next set of verses. Sorry, I'm rushing through. I'm already past time. So yeah. So in the next few verses, now we saw the beauty of Lord Krishna, the charita or the pastimes of Lord Krishna, the bewildering pastimes, the like the magical pastimes of Lord Krishna is actually discussed in the next few verses. In verse 15, I'd like to bring the attention to this word Mahat Amsha Yuktaha, accompanied by the plenary portion of Mahat Tattva. So Prabhupada explains that Lord Krishna, when he appears on this planet, he comes in his complete, with his complete entourage and Mahat Tattva, like with all his expansions, like his energies, everything in full. So it's not like, so from Krishna, the different Vishnu forms, everything, they're all there in him. It's not like they're separated from him and he's left them and come. It's not like that. So Krishna comes in full. That's what is being explained in this verse. And there's also a mention of the different levels. Like there is this purport is very deep and actually a wonderful one. I don't know if we have the time, but so this purport to verse 15, it actually describes the difference between devotees and non-devotees. So the devotees of the Lord are by nature peaceful because they have no material hankering. And then the non-devotees, who are taken to other paths, like karmis, jnanis, and yogis, they all hanker to possess some material or spiritual assets. So the examples are given in this purport. And this word called itara is non-devotees. So there's a comparison in one sense of devotees and non-devotees. The example is given of Durvasa Muni. He was a yogi who harassed Maharaja Ambarisha, because the latter was a great devotee of the Lord. So it is actually comparing devotees to non-devotees, different kind of non-devotees to devotees. And then we see the Karmi and Jnani, Hiranyakashipu, even harassed his own Vaishnava son, Prahlad Maharaja. I'm not going deep into these pastimes. We are all familiar with this. So Prabhupada explains how Karmis, Jnanis, and Yogis, they still have these kind of material tendencies and they disturb, the devotees like that. So when this kind of disturbance happens, the Lord appears, and just as electricity is generated by friction of matter anywhere and everywhere, the Lord, being all-pervading, appears because of the friction of devotees and non-devotees. So that is what is being described. Mahad Amsha Yuktaha indicates that he is accompanied by the Purushas who create the Mahat Tattva. It is confirmed in the Vedic hymns, Mahantam Vibhum Atmanam. So Lord Krishna appeared just like electricity when there was friction between Kamsa and Vasudeva and Ugrasena. Vasudeva and Ugrasena were the Lord's devotees, and Kamsa, a representative of the Karmis and Jnanis, was a non-devotee. So this way, this purport to 15 is a very important purport. When you get time, please go through it. It actually discusses the difference between devotees and non-devotees, how devotees function and how non-devotees function. So various pastimes of the Lord are discussed in these verses, 16, 15 through 24. Like there is mention of how Lord Krishna was, born in the prison house of Vasudeva. And it appears as though, he went away to, he went away from Mathura in fear, right? Like that. So Prabhupada actually explains in the purport that what is there for Krishna to fear, I mean, fear personified, right? Yet bibheti swayam bhayam, like we have read in that verse in Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto. Fear itself is, fear personified is actually fearful of the Lord. So where is the need for the Lord to run away, to Gokul like that, after he appeared? So Prabhupada explained so beautifully in the purport to verse 16 that this was just to give pleasure to his parents, like because Vasudeva and Devaki were very afraid. They were very scared for him. So he was like, okay, my parents are scared. Let me give them that pleasure, of actually protecting me. But the Lord does not need that protection, right? Like even in Ramayana, we see when Lord Rama and Sita rested, Lakshmana used to circle them and, take care of them. He was like protecting them. So does the Lord actually need any protection? It's not true, right? In fact, he's the one who gives us Rakshishyati iti Vishvaso. So he's the one who can protect us. So it's actually wrong to think that Krishna fled in fear, from Mathura. It's like, I mean, there's no semblance of truth to that statement. So very beautifully, Prabhupada describes in verse 16 purport that a pure devotee knows very well how it is possible for the Lord to adjust opposite things, but he laments for the non-devotees who, not knowing the supreme glories of the Lord, think of him as imaginary simply because there are so many apparently contradictory statements in the scriptures. Factually, there is nothing contradictory. Everything is possible when we understand the Lord as the Lord and not as one of us with all our imperfections. So it's touching on Chinte Bheda Bheda Tattva here. So Prabhupada is touching on that Tattva in this purport. And he says that anything is possible, right, for the Lord. So he does these kind of things just to give pleasure to his devotees. And several other pastimes are also discussed, like, when Krishna, he came back and he asked for forgiveness. He begged pardon from his family, from his parents, because they were not able to serve, right? They could not give that pleasure, of to Mother Devaki, of bringing them up, playing with them in their childhood, like that they did not give. So he actually, Krishna and Balarama, they apologized to their parents. Oh, mother, father, please excuse us for this inability. So Prabhupada gives 3 important points there. Even though, Krishna is the Supreme Lord, he is trying to convey that any person, any child owes his, duties to their parent, even though he may be the Supreme Lord himself, that he is required to do the required duties to his parents. He is indebted to his parents and he needs to perform like, whatever duties. The second point is that, Krishna set an example for us to follow, like how we should actually perform our duties towards our parents. And the third point is that this also gives us a glimpse of, when we owe so much to our parents, how the Lord is showing. So how much should we owe to Lord Krishna, who is the Supreme Father, right? He's providing us everything. So how much more should we be doing, in terms of devotional service for the Lord? So these are some important points, from verse 17 purport that, we can perhaps take and practice and, take lessons from. So beautiful purpose. Like I said, all purpose are golden. I'm finding it difficult to kind of skip the purpose. And then, in the other verses, the mercy to the Kumaras, like how just by smelling the tulsi leaves, right, from the lotus feet of the Lord, they got, devotional service. And Sishupala, even though he committed like 100, kind of offenses against Lord Krishna, he was still forgiven, he was liberated, like he got liberation. And it just goes to show. There's also the the pastime of Putana is also discussed here, like how even though she came to, poison the Lord gave her the Ahobakiyam verse is discussed. I am so sorry, I'm not going through that verse. It's a very, very, very important verse. But as we know, like the supreme mercy of the Lord, right? He even forgave Putana and gave her the position of a mother in the spiritual sky. So, so Krishna is like that, even from like I just Amedhyadapi Kanchanam. So what it means is, this is like from Chanakya Niti. So, when, it's a little gross, but it's of course Chanakya Niti. So when, supposing say a diamond or a gold ring, falls into stool, a person will tend to, still remove it and cleanse it, wash it with soap and water, and still, because it's precious like that, right? So similarly, Lord Krishna, even though, like people may have demoniac tendencies, but he's like, he picks out the beautiful part of it, like Amalatmanam. Even though we are full of mala, like all these impure tendencies in it, but Krishna picks out those jewels and gems from us, and he awards us accordingly, like how we see in the case of Shishupala and Putana. They came with very evil tendencies, right? They had evil intentions for the Lord, but then the Lord gives them like so high kind. So, like even though they may be a gold, in stool, like Lord Krishna recognizes the good aspects, like the virtues of a person, and he rewards them like that. So many examples are there to this, like how Srila Prabhupada, he was so merciful to the hippies, right? They were all into drugs and all the vices like that, but Srila Prabhupada was so kind, so patient, so merciful, that he, brought them to a totally different level, right? It's unimaginable for somebody, to even imagine. Like we find it difficult to preach or even distribute books, right? It's not very easy to connect with people. And imagining Prabhupada, he connected with hippies, and they all changed. So it's like, like the costless mercy and the exalted nature of Srila Prabhupada. Similarly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how he gave his association to the animals in Jharikanda, and they were chanting and dancing. How Krishna, even though Kaliya was such a poisonous snake, envious snakes are envious, and still he did not kill him. He respected the Nagapatnis. So he had a soft corner for them, and he forgave Kaliya. He was also like, he, played the role of a charioteer to Arjuna, and he would also, like in the Rajasuya sacrifice, he was washing all the sages' feet. He's the supreme personality of Lord, Godhead, and he's, playing this role, like washing all the sages' feet. And it's just that, he can, Krishna just looks at the good of us. The lesson, at least I learned from here, was, how merciful the Lord is that we are here doing what we are doing. It's just the costless mercy of the Lord and Srila Prabhupada that we are even here, trying to discuss this exalted subject matter. So that's how I felt when I was reading this different purports. And the next verse, like verse 24, is again important. For comparison, one can just imagine the difference between floating in space and residing in one of the planets. So this is actually, let me give some context to it. Yeah. So the other verses, I just, gave a gist of the summary of the different pastimes that were discussed. And yeah, let's see. Yeah, this last verse I'll discuss, the 24th verse. I consider the demons who are inimical toward the Lord to be more than the devotees, because while fighting with the Lord, absorbed in thoughts of enmity, they are able to see the Lord carried on the shoulder of Garuda. So after all these pastimes, Uddhava is actually remembering and describing. He says that he thinks that the demons are more fortunate. He says the Yadus are unfortunate. The Rajavasis are even more unfortunate because they never realize. But he says the demons are more fortunate because even though they had evil tendency, they were always, in the thought of how to kill Krishna or how to harm him, like that. So he says that the demons were very fortunate in that sense. And I just want to explain that line which I have mentioned on the slide. So just bear with me a few more minutes. The fact is that the devotees who are always engaged in the devotional service of the Lord in transcendental love are rewarded many hundreds and thousands of times more than the demons by being elevated to the spiritual planets, where they remain with the Lord in eternal blissful existence. The demons and impersonalists are awarded the facility of merging in the Brahmajyoti effulgence of the Lord, whereas the devotees are admitted, Yad Gatvana Nivartante. So once they go into the spiritual planets, they do not come back. But Prabhupada explains that the demons and impersonalists are awarded the facility of merging in Brahmajyoti of effulgence of the Lord. For a comparison, it's a very beautiful analogy. That's why I'm trying to go through this. One can just imagine the difference between floating in space and residing in one of the planets. So the devotees, they actually are, they are residing in the planet, right, with the Lord Krishna. But the these demons and impersonalists, they are like just floating in space. The pleasure of the living entities on the planets is greater than that of those who have no body and who merge with the molecules of the sun's rays. The impersonalists, therefore, are no more favored than the enemies of the Lord. Rather, they are both on the same level of spiritual salvation. So this analogy of, how the difference between floating in space and actually residing on one of the planets of the spiritual sky is given in comparison to the impersonalists and demons versus the devotees. I thought that's a wonderful analogy Srila Prabhupada is giving there. So this way, the last slide continues with, the Vraja pastimes. So long we saw the bewildering, pastimes of Lord Krishna, how he killed demons and, how he did lots of magical kind of mystical feats, which were even difficult for the demigods to actually understand what's happening. So in these last few verses from 25 to 32, we see, more details of how, of his sweet Vraja pastimes, with all the gopas, the gopis, and with his parents like that. So the cowherd boys, as famously discussed in Canto 10, Krita Punya Punja, that what kind of pious deeds have they done that they are enjoying so intimate pastimes, right? With Lord Krishna, they sit and eat with him, they play with him, they climb over him, like just as one of their friends like that. So all these different things are explained in these purports. And then, Krishna is compared to that of a lion cub. Actually, let me go to that purport. Sorry, I'm just rushing because of time. Okay. I'll just quickly wind up. Give me a few minutes. When the Lord displayed his activities just suitable for a child, he was visible only to the residents of Vrindavan. Sometimes he would cry and sometimes laugh, just like a child. And while doing so, he would appear like a lion cub. If anyone wants to enjoy the childhood pastimes of the Lord, then he has to follow in the footsteps of the residents of Vraja, like Nanda, Upananda, and other parental inhabitants. So in this verse, we see, like sometimes when attacked in the forest by demons, Krishna would appear struck with wonder, but he looked on them like the cub of a lion and killed them. So it's like, when Krishna actually kills the demons, he looks like a lion cub. We also see in Tirupavai, the first verse, Margari Tingal, Madinirendra Nannalam, and Yeranda Kanni Yeshode Ilam Singam. So their Andal also, she describes Lord Krishna as a lion cub, like that. So it's a very beautiful description. I thought that's why I just quickly shared. This is in purport 28. And Prabhupada again, goes to describe how, like Krishna is, while herding the very beautiful bulls, the Lord, who was the reservoir of all opulence and fortune, used to blow his flute, and thus he enlivened his faithful followers, the cowherd boys. So we know that Krishna, when he was around 6 to 7 years of old, he started taking care of the cows and bulls. So the importance of cows and bulls in the society is mentioned in this verse in 29. How I was hearing a class by a senior devotee, and he was mentioning that there's one person apparently in India who said that you don't have to get educated. You just come to me and I'll show you the way how to lead a complete life. So what he did was, and some person went to him and he gave him a cow and a bull and a piece of land. And so this person basically, was self-sufficient because he had the milk, the vegetables he needed, like that. So he proved it in one sense that, a cow, bull, some land, these are the main things, of sustenance. Everything else is artificial needs, which we have actually brought upon ourselves. So that is what is explained in the purport in 29, and how Prabhupada always emphasized on Varnashrama practice, and also on, farm programs, farm communities, like that. He wanted devotees to be self-sufficient and not work under somebody. When we start working under somebody, then there's always this pressure of, oh, am I doing a good job? Will I be without a job tomorrow? Like that. So Prabhupada always insisted that, as much as possible, devotees must have their own occupation. Like, they can perhaps own a business or something where they're independent. They can devote more time to Krishna, like that. So a lot of such things, beautiful things of practical relevance are given in this purport to verse 29, and how these cows and bull, a cow and bull and a piece of land is all you need to, sustain your existence on this planet, like that. And Lord killed asuras as easily as a child breaks dolls. So it was, just an ordinary, Krishna just has to will, right? He doesn't even have to lift a finger and he can, the demons can die. But it was just for the pleasure of devotees that he comes in different forms. We need something, right, to discuss about Lord Krishna. Okay, he took the lion form, then he took the boar form, then he took the tortoise form, like this, we need all these pastimes. So it's all for the pleasure of devotees that the Lord, comes and exhibits all these beautiful pastimes. And so many other pastimes are discussed, like the Kaliyadaman, and then the Govardhana pastime, how the Lord, for 7 days and nights, he protected the inhabitants of Raja. So a lot of pastimes like the Raja pastimes are discussed in detail in the last, few verses of this chapter. And let's find some very nice meditative note to end today's session. Okay, the last verse actually discusses, in the third season of the year, the Lord enjoyed as a central beauty of the assembly of women by attracting them with his pleasing songs in an autumn night brightened by moonshine. So this is the Sharad Ritu pastimes. Before leaving the land of cows, Vrindavan, the Lord pleased his young girlfriends, the transcendental gopis, in his Ras Leela pastimes. Here, Uddhava stopped his description of the Lord's activities. So this remembrance of Lord Krishna is actually happening by none other than Uddhava. So he's describing all these kind of things, the Lord's beauty, name, fame, glories, everything like that is described. So I'll pause here, and please forgive me. I went over time and I had to skip beautiful purports too. So when you find time, please do, go through the purports in more detail. They're very, very beautiful and nectarian. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to purify myself. And if I said something wrong, please feel free to chastise me and correct me. And thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandvat Pranam.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandvat Pranam. Hare Krishna, did you have a question or a comment?
Hare Krishna Mataji, thanks for the wonderful class, like Braj pastimes and all the things that you covered. It was so nice, Mataji, at your end. And it's a good experience to learn, means revising everything in the Bhagavatam, Braj Pas, and all the Krishna Leelas. That's a good on our part also, Mataji. We are listening. Mataji, like we have a new student, Ryan, like he just wish you. So like I would like your blessings to him to as a under the shelter of book Bhagavad and person Bhagavad. So I request like you can bless him so that he's a new bird in the bhakti devotional service. So like he may forward and grow in bhakti.
Jai, so happy to have Ryan's association here. And if it's okay, can I ask how old he is?
Yes, 17.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, you are way, way more advanced than all of us. You are taking to Krishna consciousness at such a young age. And all devotees, please unmute, and we will say 3 Hari Bols for Ryan. Hari Bol.
Hari
Hari
Bol.
Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Ryan, please join us again and give us your association. And you've taken to Krishna consciousness at such a young age. So you're so fortunate, and we are so happy to have you here amongst us. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
ma'am. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, and don't miss the association of Bharat Prabhu and Bhavna Mataji. They are wonderful devotees, and I'm so happy that you are in their association, and there's a lot of things I can learn from them actually. So yeah, so I'm very happy that you are in their association. So you'll be fine. I'm very sure of that. So nice to have you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, ma'am. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Vinita Mataji, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I have realizations, Mataji. Thank you so much, Mataji, for such a beautiful class. Like first chapter also you only covered, and second also you. Thank you so much, Mataji, for very detailed explanation and going through the purpose. I really like all the points that you have explained, especially like you are telling, like we are like in the fish out of the water, and you give me gulab jamun, you give me rasgulla, nothing is going to help me except you put me back in the water. Like that, when I am back in the service to Krishna, then only I am happy. Otherwise, everything is going to put me in the trouble only, whatever you give me. And even though I may feel that I am happy for a sense, like little bit of time, then I realize this is not my real happiness. I need to find something else. Thank you so much, Mataji, and very beautiful pastimes also, Vraja pastimes also you have described. Very grateful to you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Vinita. You're at such a high level of realization. Like you are almost like a Vairagi. You don't have any material tendencies. Very nice to have your association always. Bhavna Mataji, you have something to share?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Danvat Pranam.
Then
Thanks for giving such a nice class, and thank you for giving your blessings to Ryan. And we are not at that level that you give us to us. We are not at that level. We are learning from you and all the devotees in Bhakti Sangh. Mataji, my question is like that you explained like that was Bhrigu Muni who showed arrow to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. But as I heard and read somewhere in the scriptures that it was Bali from the Ramayana pastime.
Yeah, this one I heard from Radhesham Prabhuji. I prepare using his classes. So he was explaining this pastime, Mataji. So I heard it from him. But I can, if you have heard a different explanation, I can check with him, if possible, and get back to you. But this is what he said, like, because when Bhrigu Muni kicked on his chest, so he was given an opportunity. So he came in the form of Jara and, shot that arrow at Lord Krishna's feet. And then, Krishna knew that it is Jara. And he was like, Jara was feeling so regretful that he did this to the Lord. He was like in shock that he could do such a thing. And then Krishna was like, don't worry, I'm just giving you this chance to purify yourself. And, he went back to the spiritual world like that. So that's what Prabhuji was explaining. So I just got this from there, Mataji.
Okay, Mataji. Thank you for clearing.
Thank you, Mataji. You said it was Baki? I mean, sorry, what was your...
Bali. The Sugriv and Bali was in Ramayana.
Okay. Yeah, Bali. I think that was Jatayu, Mataji.
Some place it is said that Lord Ram strike the arrow to Bali by hitting behind the tree. In the same way, it happens like in the Dwapar Yuga when Krishna was there. So Bali also took that take a kind of revenge.
Yeah, I was recently listening to a class about this the Sugriva Vali, like, let me, I was listening like what he came as in Dwapara Yuga. I tend to forget that, but I will look it up, Mataji. I was just recently listening one class, in which there was this mention of Vali. Yeah, sorry, Mataji, it's not coming to my mind now, but I will
It's
try to look
okay.
up the reference and
It's
I'll
okay,
convey.
Mataji.
Mm.
No issue.
Yeah, Vali was somebody else. This one was, yeah, it's kind of slipping my mind. I was recently listening, like, Vali came as. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'm not
It's
able
okay,
to read.
Mataji. No issue.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mataji.
Mataji.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anybody else has any questions or realizations to share? Mukunda?
Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you, Mataji, for the very beautiful class. No, Mataji, I don't have any questions. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you for your association. Yeah, I think if nobody else has any questions.
Hare Krishna Mataji, like I want to share my realization one.
Yeah, sure.
Bharat this side. So Mataji, like as we are doing the Bhakti Vaibhav from Gaurang Darshan Prabhuji, so like your Bhakti Sangh and your teachings are very helping to us, both Bhavna and Bharat. Like we learned a lot from you and other teachers also. Like so, it is like a base that has been created to learn and grow in Srimad Bhagavatam. So like it's helping us very much, Mataji. I want to thank you at your lotus feet. Thank you very much, Mataji, and the whole Bhakti Sangh group.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for sharing. Actually, I think we are going in circles. I learned from Gaurang Darshan Prabhu's classes. So, it's like we just keep going, like wonderful classes by Gaurang Darshan Prabhu and so many senior devotees who are like immersed in the Bhagavatam Katha. And if I'm able to speak even a few words, it's just thanks to them. That's how I feel, Prabhuji. And thank you for your association and sharing. All glories to Shishi Guru and Gauranga and Srila Prabhupada. All glories to these merciful Vaishnavas who have come up with such beautiful classes and summary studies and, such beautiful material and made it so easy for even a fool like me to speak. So I'm eternally indebted to all the devotees who made it easy. Yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Vinita?
Yeah. Hare Krishna. If there are no more questions or realizations, we can end the call here. I would like to offer my obeisances to Mataji and all the Vaishnavas assembled on the call. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripasindhubhyeva patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Har Grace Sukha Sagari Mataji ki jai.
All glories to Shishi Guru and
Thank you
Gauranga and
everyone
Srila
for joining.
Prabhupada.
Closing the call, dear devotees. We'll meet again
Thank you
next
so much, Mataji.
next week. Maybe next week we are giving holiday because it's Gaur Purnima, and after that week we'll meet. Hari Bol.
Yeah, happy Gaur Purnima to everybody.